God of the future, at this time of loss and transition, we pray for the future of our nation, which Queen Elizabeth loved and served her whole life long. Strengthen and guide those tasked with taking her legacy forward, particularly King Charles and the Queen Consort Camilla, and fill us all at this time of change with confidence in you and in your eternal changelessness. Amen.
Amen. On behalf of all staff at the Borough Council, may I pay our utmost respect to Her Majesty the Queen for her unwavering leadership and the love she has shown both country and Commonwealth over the last 70 years. Her consistent, reassuring presence will be very much missed, but our gratitude and affection will be enduring.
Today we gather as a borough, as a council, and as representatives of our communities to give grateful thanks for the life of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Her gifts to us of duty and service have been unparalleled, a strong, dependable and guiding life over more than 70 years. Called to the throne at such a young age, Her Majesty never wavered in giving of herself for the good of the country and the Commonwealth. Her council has been cherished by prime ministers and leaders around the globe. She has been uniquely placed with a view over so many momentous events that have shaped our world and forged our lives today. But despite providing over great matters of state, her relationship with us has also been an intensely personal one. Her image is a mark of confidence on banknotes and on stamps, which has been with us every day of our lives. Her visits around the country and world, often accompanied by her Prince, the Duke of Edinburgh, saw her meet and touch the hearts of millions of people. Her patronage of many charities has indelibly changed the lives of many more. Our borough has proud links with the royal family, where the Lions of England forever fused with our own proud heritage in our borough arms. We remember fondly Her Majesty's visit to Great Yarmouth in 1985 when she came to this very town hall, received by a choir of young voices in our assembly room and greeting well wishes from the balcony. She saw the river, so central to our history. She toured our marketplace and visited the Fishermen's Hospital. She met with our proud and brave lifeboat men from Great Yarmouth, Bolton and Casey-on-Sea. One of our youngest citizens was so enamoured after talking to the Queen that she even tried to get into the royal car when it came time for the royal party to depart. She was stopped only by an eagle-eyed Prince Philip. More recently, our links with the Queen have been embodied by Bolton's Bruno Pink, whose work as pageant master saw Her Majesty's service celebrated earlier this year through an international chain of Platinum Jubilee beacons. I can conceive of no more fitting tribute to the Queen, who herself has been a guiding light for so many of us as an unequal public servant. Now, as we grieve that irreplaceable loss, as our nation and the Commonwealth mourns and give thanks for that blazing light and leadership, we remember too that Her Majesty was head of a family as well as a nation. We give thanks to the royal family's support of her duties and share our deep commiserations for their loss at this most difficult of times. But now they must put their grief aside for duty's sake, even though, as in the Queen's own words, grief is the price we pay for love, and we know that they will be hurting most of all. We give thanks especially for the quiet grace of our new King Charles III, who mourns his mother as he exceeds the throne. He has already shown his steadfast commitment to the realms of these islands and the Commonwealth as Prince of Wales, with especially strong concern for those in our society most needful of support through his many charities. He has also demonstrated great interest in our heritage and prescient concern for our environment. It was my sombre privilege to read the proclamation of his accession on behalf of the borough. Tonight, we as a council send the King our full-throated and full-hearted support and allegiance. These last few days, while expected, have nonetheless come as a shock to many of us. Our private, emotional responses have been joined with civic responsibilities and hard work by many across the country in marking these events quickly, safely, with dignity. Here at the Council, I would like to give particular thanks to Laura Goodman and Billy Todd for their work in coordinating our civic events, both internally and with the Lieutenancy Office and national programmes. Our porters, as always, have helped our events go smoothly and have been especially supportive in helping our residents pay their respects to our Buckingham and Dolan's. I give particular thanks to Roger Smith, Charlie McKeeton and Edward Longworth. We've had to move many events, and I think Sammy and the team in doing so, and for arranging this evening's extraordinary council meeting so efficiently. Our communications and media team, and particularly James Goffin and Chloe Ingram, has helped us quickly and assuredly keep members, staff and the public updated on unfolding events. I also thank KQ, Chuck Foster, Lauren Meisner, Gary Philo and Andy Borthwick for their assistance in preparing and supporting our response. And externally, we have had valuable support from the Reverend Canon Simon Wood at Great Yarmouth Minster, the Bishop of Thetford, the Right Reverend Alan Winton, and the Norfolk Police. I have no hesitation in supporting the proposal to write to His Majesty King Charles III to express our sincere and heartfelt sorrow at the passing of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and to reaffirm our loyalty to him as her successor and rightful King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. God save the King.
Queen Elizabeth II was, in my view, a phenomenal human being. She multitasked even before it became fashionable, and the red boxes were delivered every day. She was a beloved daughter, sister, aunt, wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother to her family and our sovereign. She was a constant, the best diplomat we will ever see, never putting a foot wrong, and many have spoken about her work ethic. In fact, one of the many interviews undertaken these past few days, a young man said, when asked what he liked the most, he replied, "She taught us how to conduct ourselves and how to behave. We will never see the like again. She was one of a kind." For any of us who have experienced loss, we would grieve in private. The royal family do not have that luxury. They are on show now, undertaking their duties at this saddest of times. King Charles III has shown us these last few days he is ready, very much his own man with many passions and interests. The smooth transition has happened before our eyes, all done in the public gaze. We have witnessed history. God bless the Queen. Long live the King.
Borough has a long history with the monarchy, stretching back many centuries, and tonight as a council we are paying our own small tribute to quite possibly the greatest monarch of them all, stretching back to 1066. Most of us in this room tonight have known only our Queen, as have the many hundreds of thousands who have been paying their own tributes across the United Kingdom in these past 7 days, and the millions more across the world. Apparently they say up to 4 billion people worldwide will watch her funeral on Monday as she's finally laid to rest next to her beloved husband, Prince Philip of Windsor. I'm sure, like you, I've been astonished by the scenes and pictures we have witnessed on our TV screens in the past few days, not only in our country but across the Commonwealth and indeed around the world, as people come together to mark the passing of this truly remarkable figurehead who was simply known to everyone as the Queen. I was fortunate enough to meet the Queen when she visited Great Yarmouth in 1985 on the marketplace, as my parents had a stall there, and it was wide open, and I walked across to meet her face to face with my young son, who was only 2 years old, and he handed her a bouquet of flowers, a memory that I will never ever forget as long as I live. And also being fortunate enough to attend a Royal Garden Party in 2017. And me and Jackie, when we stood outside of the queue waiting to go in, I will never forget that a Chinese lady came up to me and said, "Why are you all queuing up here today?" We said, "Well, we're going to the Royal Garden Party." Kerry, you were there. And she said, "Where do you buy the tickets?" I said, "Sorry, they're not a ticket event." But those memories will stick with me forever as I live. But as we mourn the sad loss of our Queen, we must remember we now have a new monarch in King Charles III, the oldest person to become king at the age of 73. Again though, we watch him carrying out his duties impeccably, talking to people all over the country with his Queen Consort by his side. What must his feelings be though, remembering that he's just lost his mother, in fact all the royal family who have just lost the head of their family. When we lose a loved one, we have private time to grieve with our families and friends. Their grief though is being played out in front of billions on a worldwide scale, every day. But that's what makes our monarchy so special, not just for the pomp and ceremony, but their lifetime of devotion to duty. Maybe it's the royal blood that flows through their veins. Who knows? But the scenes we are witnessing are astonishing. I'm sure we will live long in all of our memories. So it gives me great pleasure tonight to propose the recommendation before us by the Chief Executive. As we say goodbye to our beloved Queen, may I finally say, God save the King. Thank you.
Queen Elizabeth II was remarkable, ascending to the throne in 1952 and serving as our Queen for 70 years, our longest ever serving monarch. Nobody under the age of 70 has known anything other than Queen Elizabeth II, and now with the end of the Elizabethan era, we'll be wondering how King Charles III can follow in her footsteps, but I feel sure that he will. During her reign, the Queen has been ahead of the country for all of us, and somebody who brought together a whole country at times of fear, discord and uncertainty. And we remember the Queen's appeal at the start of the coronavirus outbreak, that in the years that come, everyone will be able to take pride in how they responded to this challenge. And those who come after us will say, the Britons of this generation were as strong as any, that the attributes of self-discipline, of quiet good-humoured resolve, and of fellow feeling still characterise this country. The pride on who we are is not part of our past, it defines our present and future. I'm sure that these remarks touched us all, and that whatever our views are on the monarchy, people will respect the way the Queen conducted herself throughout her 70-year reign and her dedication to public service. We should also remember that the Queen was a mother and a grandmother and had to deal with all the ups and downs of family life, which we all have to deal with at some time. We remember her family at this time and the loss that they must feel. I never met the Queen, but I'm glad I lived in her reign. To this end, I will read one of the Queen's quotes, which I think sums up her reign. I cannot lead you into battle. I do not give you the laws or administer justice, but I can do something else. I can give you my heart and my devotion to these old islands and to all the people of our brotherhood of nations. There is absolutely no doubt that the Queen will be greatly missed by all, and I have pleasure in seconding the recommendation of the Chief. Thank you, Worship.
I'd like to say, and I feel very privileged to follow some wonderful speeches that have just been made here. It really is humbling. But when I think back, and to be perfectly frank, when I came here tonight, I thought I'd be so cool and collected. But now all of a sudden I feel very, very nervous. Because I go back, first of all, to 1985, and standing across there by the pumping station, my lovely daughter Anna was picked out by a lady in waiting, and she, and I like our leader, Carl Smith, the immense pride in seeing my daughter presented to the Queen, giving her flowers and returning to the crowd is absolutely immense. And today I did actually go through all the records and find that photograph, which sometimes appears in the album for members on Facebook. So that was the first real consequence of me having a tenuous connection with Her Majesty. The second one was my son, who was always a military person. Even at school, he was in the combined index force. He then went off to Sandhurst and did the business at Sandhurst. And when he finished his army connection, joined the police force. And for the past 20 years, the connection I have through him is the fact, and I have spoken to him and I can say this, that he has served the Queen by his responsibilities as a station sergeant up at Sandringham and Andover, and he's been doing that job for the best part of 20 years. That is an immense pride to me, is that the responsibility he takes in looking after the royal family and guests is absolutely immense to me. So there are those two connections, worshipful men. From my own personal one, which I understand a couple of people here may have been in that same situation, to suddenly receive a letter from the Cabinet Office saying that via the Prime Minister of the day, I was asked if I would accept the honour of being a member of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. Like so many people, they say they think it's a joke and everything, but I was deadly serious. And because the time came, and I travelled to London to receive the award, and again today, well, Your Worship, I was looking at the letters painted on my study wall, and again, that's amazing how it brings a tear to your eyes. The day that was presented was by the Prince, who now the King, and King Charles made me feel the most important man for the 90 seconds or so that I've ever felt. So, worshipful men, I hope you would accept the way that I've said this as a tribute that I pay to the Queen, and God save the King. Thank you, Majesty.
Of the Lady, Queen Elizabeth II. Her visit to Great Yarmouth in 1985, I worked at Northgate Hospital, which was at that time partly long-stage geriatrics. My colleagues and myself pushed patients to the minister. It wasn't the minister then, it was Nicholas. Anyway, and they lined, the wheelchairs lined each side of the entrance. And it was so funny because she came to speak to my patient, and I dared put my phone up, put the camera up, because I thought, I don't take a picture, that would be rude. So, but anyway, it was lovely. I know my children also remember that visit because the schools were attending there as well. So, the second was, a few generations later, we took the grandchildren to Sandringham, because on Sandringham was a tradition. On Sunday they go to church. She drives along in a car and she gets out. And all the children line up and they all take presents and gifts to give to the Queen. Two of my grandchildren, my Alexandra gave her some of my homemade chutney. I don't know if she enjoyed it, I never heard. The other one, Kate, she gave her a little box of Ferrero Rocher, but she didn't hand that to anybody else. She kept hold of it and got back with her cover. But the third memory I had was having the privilege of being Mayor of Great Yarmouth, like some of my other colleagues, and we had the invitation to go on a party in London, which was a wonderful day. Thank you. And I just have to say, these are the memories of a wonderful day, our Queen, for 17 years. Thank you.
Yeah. I've never known another monarch. When I first started in politics, I could say I was fairly radical. I was totally opposed. I have learned, a lady once said to me, there's no good getting old if you don't get wiser. And I have appreciated the Queen and everything she's done. She's a better statesman than I'll ever be, and I believe probably anybody that's sitting in this council chamber. And as for King Charles III, I wish him the very best, and I hope he lives long and has a good life and serves us well. Thank you.
I, like many, had the pleasure of meeting the Queen. I had the pleasure of meeting the Queen on two separate occasions. And what was apparent was the fact that she was a remarkable woman, a strong, articulate, brave woman. And it's something that I know my colleague Penny has highlighted, an absolute trailblazer. We talk now about women's rights, but when we have a monarch that was in charge of this country for 70 years and was looked up and admired by the rest of the world, it indicates just what an incredible person she was. She also, in talking to her, had an absolute love of Norfolk. And like many of you said when she visited the town back in the 80s, she also had a love of Great Yarmouth. So she was knowledgeable as well as wise. And it gets to a stage where all of us as a country mourn the passing of that incredible woman. But likewise, our heart and knowledge is strong in the belief that King Charles III will continue her legacy, and it's something all of us are proud to be a part of. God save the King.
Your Worship, I was only 4 years old when Her Majesty the Queen visited Great Yarmouth in 1985, so I have no recollection of seeing her, but I am reliably informed that I sat on my father's shoulders when she addressed the crowds from this building's balcony. Other than that, I have no physical instance of when I have met her or been involved with, sadly. Your Worship, that doesn't mean to say I have nothing to pay tribute to her for. When you leave behind the halls of education, mature somewhat, gain a family of your own, you come to find that sacrifice is needed, as you have a duty to care and comfort for those you hold dear. This is what I pay tribute to her for sacrifice, duty and devotion she gave to her inherited family, the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. All of us in this chamber understand the pressure at times of remaining dutiful to our constituents, whether that be with added pressure of a young family, another place of work, or sheer health reasons. However, across the whole chamber, we remain steadfast in representing our communities. We each have our own way of doing this, but it works towards the same aim: to serve. This is what the Majesty the Queen, no matter what added pressure she had personally, she continued to serve. Continued with the British stiff upper lip, rallying those around the country with hope. Your Worship, I would like to sum up on the words of Her Majesty the Queen's broadcast to the nation during the worst times of the pandemic, which during them dark days meant so much to the country. She said, "We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again." She was right. And I'm sure around the world many people will wish to meet Her Majesty the Queen again. God save the King.
Since last week's very sad news of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, we have watched on as the country and indeed the world has grieved. With Her Majesty's advancing years and recent bouts of ill health, in some ways we were preparing ourselves for this moment, but has been blatantly obvious this week. The shock announcement of her passing really showed how we were not prepared for the loss of this great lady, and how our emotions have caught us out, taking this as such a personal loss in our lives. As has been said countless times too, the Queen is all many of us have ever known, and we have felt her passing very deeply. We share in this collective grief. In 1947, whilst in South Africa on her 21st birthday, the Queen made her famous declaration pledging her whole life, be it long or short, shall be devoted to your service. That, as we know, is a promise she has kept. Her deep devotion to duty, her wise counsel, and her selflessness was exemplary. As our longest reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth became a young female leader very much in a man's world, ahead of her time, and she has served with courage, determination and fortitude. Just a few months ago, we delighted in celebrating another of her historic milestones, the Platinum Jubilee, not just here within the borough, but also seeing such great scenes of happiness and joy throughout the UK. Who could not smile at the Queen and Paddington Bear's revelation about marmalade sandwiches and our discovery of just what Her Majesty has kept in her handbag all these years? For myself, coming from parents born in 2 different countries, my mum being English and her family devoted royalists, and my dad Irish and his family were most definitely not royalists. A mixed blessing I always considered. Being brought up here in England and having family visits and holidays spent in Ireland, some holidays in particular, other than if my mum had events planned, such as arranging the street parties on our estate, the 1977 Queen's Silver Jubilee and the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer, and the summer of 1985, which has been mentioned now, my mum was very insistent that a trip wouldn't be planned to Ireland until she knew the date of the Queen's intended summer visit, which happened to then be in August. She couldn't possibly miss this. As it happened, my dad's brother and his wife decided they would visit us that year for a change from the city of Derry in Northern Ireland. So they arrived, and whilst here the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh made their momentous visit. My uncle and aunt were not at all interested, but we did encourage them to come along and see the Queen and the Duke. Eventually they decided they would join us on the day, and they were amazed at how the locals were. The excitement, the delighted cheers, the flag waving. They couldn't help but be caught up in our excitement, and were so surprised at the amount of affection and admiration in which the Queen was held, and how proud we were to have her in our town. With the complexities of England and Ireland's history, it didn't quite turn them into royal fans, but they did go home with a differing opinion of this great lady and the esteem in which she was held. And I was reminded of this event while speaking to my uncle on the phone this week. Finally, I would like to say an Irish blessing my dad used to say, "O yesh day, Garev Anam, may her soul be on God's right hand. Rest in peace, Your Majesty. Thank you for everything. God save the King."
Yes, the monarch. I was lucky enough during my year as mayor, when going to Buckingham Palace, I got to speak to a naval captain, and as we talked, Her Majesty came along the line, and she suddenly stopped and started to speak to him. And what impressed me was the amount of knowledge she knew about the ship he was in, and all about it. And she put so many people at ease that you felt very relaxed in her company. I also had the pleasure of meeting our King when he came to Yarmouth to the seafront, and he was walking around the group of us, and he suddenly picked me out, and he said, "Malcolm, you're in tourism." And I was absolutely shocked, and I said, yes I am. And he said, "What sort of summer are you hoping for?" And I said, "Well, a very hot one." And he said, "Well, no, you've got to think about my plants, my flowers." And I said, "Oh, yes, I will, thank you." But I was rather shocked with that. And I was also honoured with meeting Princess Anne when she attended us on 2 occasions. Both occasions, what impressed me was the knowledge. I had to introduce 5 or 6 people to her, and the knowledge she knew about those people was absolutely astounding. I mean, we say they don't do much, but the knowledge she would have had to know to meet everyone. There was 25 in the list to go around. She spoke to everyone. I mean, the royals were very lucky to have them. It's each saying that it was very special.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief. I think most things have been said, but I think one of the things that I wanted to say is that most thought she was a mother, a grandmother, and great-grandmother. And I think we can all recollect our own individual griefs when we've lost family members. I think it's exactly the same here. And I've never considered myself to be a royalist or indeed a Republican, but I have to say that when somebody gives so many years of service to a country, I think you have to hold that person give a great deal of respect. I think when you look over those 70 years, you think to yourself, well, I wasn't even alive when she came to the throne. And I just think to myself at the times that she's done significant things. And I think Councillor Payne just mentioned going to Ireland, Northern Ireland, was a very, very significant thing, and probably something that really put down in the annals of history. And she's met tens of thousands of people across the world. And each of those individuals will have their own particular memories of when they met her. And indeed, although I can't say that I met her personally, I was obviously in her presence on a number of occasions, certainly when it was the State of Parliament. And obviously, a part of my memories are when I've seen her read out those particular statements in those events. But I think the main thing is, as I said, it's been a mother, and my mother was born in the same year as as Queen Elizabeth. And I just look back on those as having, my mum died when she was 94 last year, and although I mourned her death, those were celebrating her life. And I think in days and weeks to come, I think people will celebrate the life of Queen Elizabeth, because there's a number of things that she's been through as a mother and as a grandmother, but there's many things that she's been through on our behalf, serving as our Queen in the United Kingdom and the territories. So I just join in the celebration of her life, as I did for my mother, and obviously the 70 years of service is something that will never be repeated, and it's something that we should cherish.
I'd just like to wish to give my thanks to our Queen and gratitude of the incredible 70 years of service. So much has already been said, but I just wanted to give personal thanks for the loyalty that she's given her people, a sacrifice like no other. I, like many others, I don't know why I'm getting emotional. I, like many others, have never known any other queen or king, and unfortunately never got to meet her. But like many, feel like I knew her because she was ours, our queen. She was a constant, a calm during the difficult times and the good times of our nation. We as a nation always looked to her for guidance and reassurance, and it now deeply saddens me that she's no longer there. And actually gives me fear for the future ahead now that she's gone. We share the grief of our royal family, as we have also lost our queen. But my heart goes to her family, as she was, as people have said, a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother, and a friend to many. But now we must look to the King, and I wish him strength and love during this difficult time, and to lead us forwards. God save the King. Thank you.
Your Worship, Councillors, as your High Steward, it is a huge honour that you invite me as a guest to your council meeting here this evening. Whilst the initial shock following the death of Her Majesty the Queen has faded, we still all feel numb at the loss of our longest serving sovereign. We know that Her Majesty, along with all the other members of the royal family, had a deep affection for Norfolk, enjoying family life at Sandringham and the brief respite provided there from the responsibilities of the Crown. Speaking personally, I had the privilege to attend one of the informal lunches held at Buckingham Palace. Much to my surprise, I found myself seated at the Queen's right-hand side. I enjoyed a wonderful 90 minutes in which we discussed agriculture, conservation, and all sorts of issues that face our countryside. As the dessert was being served, the footman stepped back onto the tail of one of the Queen's corgis, which let out a fearsome yelp of pain. A complete hush fell over the dining room, And into that silence, I heard myself say, in my broadest Norfolk accent, "Bless mine, the poor old dog." To which the Queen then laughed, and conversation around the table resumed. The Queen herself was a wonderful mimic, and there was always that bubbling twinkle just behind her blue eyes. Thank you, ma'am, for a life of duty, service, and for the example that you have set us all. May God watch over your family at this sad and difficult time. God save the King.
God save the King.